Lila Mercer burst from the trail, cut off, her dress torn at the hem, her breath cutting sharp in her throat. "Elias, don't look there," she gasped, clutching his saddle with shaking hands. "Don't look past the ridge. Please." Elias didn't answer. His eyes were already drifting toward the jagged line of Blackwater Canyon, where the sun bled orange against stone and the shadows moved in ways that didn't belong to the wind. Something flickered, torchlight, low and deliberate. Lila grabbed his coat sleeve with both hands. "I'm serious. They're watching. If they see you looking, they'll come for you too." The horse stamped nervously. Even the insects had gone silent. Elias slid one boot to the ground and steadied her by the elbows. Her pulse trembled under his fingers. "Easy," he murmured. She shook her head violently. "Easy? The same men who took my husband are right over that ridge. You think they'll let anyone else walk free after seeing them?" The name husband hung in the air like a stone thrown into deep water. Elias felt the weight of it, the grief sharpening her voice. Her eyes darted toward the canyon again. Fearful, knowing, haunted. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Elias said. "I had to warn you," she whispered. "I saw you riding this way all morning, and I know how you look at things others turn from." Elias didn't reply. He stepped past her, boots grinding on the dry dirt as he lifted his chin toward the ridge. Lila let out a sound between a cry and a curse, reaching for him again, but missing. The wind carried a low thrum, metal striking stone, then muffled shouts drifting from the canyon mouth. Elias narrowed his eyes. Figures moved behind the rock face, jerking, laboring. Torches flared, then dipped. "There," Lila whispered, pointing before pulling her hand back as if the gesture itself were dangerous. "Do you see? That's where they took him. That's where they take all the men who vanish." Elias watched the shadows longer than he should have, long enough to feel the prickling sense of being watched in return. "Elias," she breathed, "please, don't look any longer. They—" Her voice died. A single torch on the ridge lifted, held steady, as if signaling. Then it dropped out of sight. Elias stepped back toward his horse. "Someone needed to see," he said quietly. Lila stiffened. "And what happens now?" Elias tightened the reins. His jaw set like weathered stone. "Now they know I did." A distant shout echoed from the canyon, sharp, alarmed, answering the torch's signal. Lila's hands flew to her mouth. Elias swung into the saddle, eyes still locked on the ridge. The sun slipped lower, the shadows stretching long over Dust Creek Road, and the quiet told him everything. He had looked where the town dared not, and whatever lived in that canyon was already coming. The canyon walls closed in fast as Elias guided his horse between them, the air turning colder the deeper he rode. Loose stones rattled down from the cliffs above, too many to be from animals. Someone was watching. Someone was following. A flicker of movement caught his eye. Lila, half hidden behind a boulder, her breath misting faintly in the shadowed morning light. She shouldn't have been here, but her eyes told him she wasn't turning back. Elias didn't call out. He simply rode on. Far ahead, the canyon widened just enough for the morning sun to spill over a crude wooden beam driven into the rock. Shackles clanged softly as a man slumped against it shifted his weight. Skin bruised, knuckles torn, eyes half open but alive. Lila's gasp echoed off the stone before she managed to smother it with trembling fingers. She ran past Elias, stumbling toward the man. "Thomas! Thomas!" The prisoner tried to lift his head. "Lila!" His voice cracked like old timber. Before she reached him, Elias held out an arm to stop her. Not a word, just a firm shake of his head. She froze, breath sharp because she felt it too now. The canyon wasn't empty. Boots scraped on gravel. Elias turned slowly. The Blackwater claim jumpers stepped from behind a cluster of spiny brush. Half a dozen men, faces red from the sun, and twisted with the satisfaction of catching someone they'd rather not release. Their rifles glinted dully in the half-light. One of them smirked. "Someone's looking where he ain't supposed to." Another spat into the dust. "That's him, the rancher." They moved closer, spreading out. Elias's hand hovered near his hip, though no gun hung at his side. Lila whispered urgently, "Elias, please don't." A shout rose from the canyon entrance. Another gang member signaling. More men appeared above on the ridges, silhouettes sharp against the morning sky. Rifles loaded. A trap sprung tight. Town thought we'd stay quiet forever, one of the outlaws said, voice low and biting. But we don't mind adding more workers down here. Elias didn't speak. His gaze drifted to the prisoner's wrists, raw and bleeding, to Lila's trembling shoulders, to the spread of armed men closing the circle. Then something shifted inside him, a stillness like a breath drawn from a long-forgotten place. The leader stepped forward, jabbing a finger at Elias. "You've seen too much." Elias's voice came out steady, cold. "I've seen what men become when no one's willing to look." The leader laughed. "Well, now you're going to see what happens to folks who do." Behind Elias, Thomas strained against the shackles, whispering through cracked lips, "Run, please." Lila's hand found Elias's coat, clinging tight. "Don't fight them." Not alone, but the outlaws were already moving in, rifles lifting, boots crunching toward him. And in the taut silence between one step and the next, Elias felt the past he'd buried shift beneath his feet, as if the canyon itself recognized a man it once feared. The first rifle but slammed into Elias's ribs before the dust of the canyon had even settled around them. Lila shouted, grabbing at the nearest outlaw, but she was shoved aside. Thomas strained helplessly against his chains, voice cracking as he called out her name. Elias dropped to one knee, breath tight, dust clinging to his coat. A rough hand twisted his collar and yanked him upright. Another outlaw pressed a revolver to his jaw. "Move," the leader snarled. "We're talking in town. Let everybody see what happens when a man sticks his nose where it don't belong." They dragged Elias up the narrow path toward Dust Creek, the canyon walls falling away as the sun lit the ridges with a hard, unforgiving glare. Lila followed, shaking but refusing to stay behind, her boots slipping on loose gravel as she climbed after them. By the time they reached the edge of town, doors slammed shut and curtains twitched. The outlaws marched in bold, fanning across the dusty main road like they owned it. Dogs barked and then went silent. A baby cried somewhere inside a boarded-up home. "Everyone out," the leader roared. "Right now." Slowly, townsfolk stepped from their porches. Old men, ranch hands, shopkeepers, mothers clutching their children. Faces tight with fear. No one dared speak. Elias stood in the center of the street, hands bound, dust settling around him in a pale cloud. Lila stood beside him, shaking but unbroken. The leader grinned wide enough to show a chipped tooth. "One more step toward our ridge, and this whole place burns." A murmur went through the crowd. Elias lifted his chin. "It doesn't have to go this way." The outlaw jammed the revolver harder against his jaw. "Shut up, old man." From the back of the crowd, a frail voice trembled out. "Hold on now, hold on." An elderly veteran, one of the few who still wore remnants of an old uniform, stepped forward, squinting at Elias's face. "I know you," he whispered. The silence deepened. "I seen you once 20 years back at the border towns." The leader scoffed. "What, this one?" "Just a rancher." The veteran's hand shook as he pointed. No, I know those eyes. That stillness. I'd recognize it anywhere." He swallowed hard. "Sandstone. Reaper." Gasps cracked through the crowd like gunfire. Lila turned sharply toward Elias, disbelief widening her eyes. The outlaws hesitated, shifting, uncertain, but the leader barked a laugh, waving his gun wildly. "That old ghost? He's dead." The veteran shook his head, voice barely above a prayer. "If he's dead, then the dead are walking Dust Creek." Elias said nothing. His stare stayed fixed, unflinching, on the men surrounding him. Lila's voice broke softly. "Elias, what are they talking about?" But the outlaws didn't let the moment linger. The leader grabbed Elias by the collar and shoved him forward. "Enough of this. He fights me. Alone. Now." Dust swirled around them as the town held its breath. Elias stepped into the street's open center, and the weight of truth settled over Dust Creek like a storm ready to break. The revolver clattered at Elias's feet, thrown there by the leader with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. The gang fanned out behind him, rifles cocked. Dust swirled in tight circles as the wind cut across the open street. "Pick it up," the leader barked. "Let's give these folks a show." Elias didn't move. The crowd pressed back against the storefronts, breaths held tight. Lila stood nearest him, trembling, her fingers knotted in the fabric of her skirt. "Don't do this," she whispered. "Please." The leader lifted his own gun. "Last chance, old man." Elias stepped away from the weapon. Not toward the outlaw, not toward the crowd, but toward the old oak post near the well, a place marked by years of weathered earth. He dropped to one knee and brushed away the dust with his palm. A murmur rippled through the townspeople. Something glinted beneath the surface. Elias dug deeper with his fingers until the wooden grip emerged, sun-bleached but unmistakable. A revolver, sandstone-handled, buried long ago. Gasps broke like snapping twigs. The leader's laugh died in his throat. No, it can't be." Elias rose slowly, the revolver balanced in his hand as comfortably as if he'd never put it down. The air thickened. Even the horses tied along the rail went still. Lila stared at him, voice barely a breath. "Elias, what are you?" His answer was the way he stepped into the center of the street, steady, inevitable, like a man walking toward an old promise. The leader snapped out of a shock and jerked his gun up. "Kill him." The first shot came from Pike's revolver. A flash, a crack, a streak of fire cutting through the air. Before the echo even touched the canyon rim, Elias's hand blurred. His revolver thundered once, and Pike's gun spun from his grasp, skittering across the ground like a scared lizard. All 10 rifles jerked up in panic. Elias moved. Not fast, impossibly fast. Each squeeze of the trigger was a heartbeat, each step precise, measured, silent. Bullets smacked rifles from outlaw hands, shattered belt buckles, tore through holsters. Men dropped to their knees, shouting, not from wounds but from shock, disarmed faster than their eyes could follow. Their leader staggered back, clutching his empty hand, eyes wide. "You're dead. You're supposed to be dead." Elias leveled the revolver, breath steady. "You should have stayed in the canyon." The outlaw lunged for a fallen gun. Elias fired once. The leader hit the dirt hard, dust rising around him like smoke. The rest of the gang froze, hands lifted, weapons scattered. Silence swept across Dust Creek, heavy, absolute. Even the wind held back. Lila stepped toward Elias, tears shining, not from fear, but from relief. "You saved us, all of us." Elias lowered the revolver, gaze drifting toward the ridge. "Just did what needed doing." The townsfolk gathered, freed prisoners stumbling into their loved ones' arms. Dust Creek breathed again. Elias holstered the sandstone-handled revolver for the first time in decades, and the storyteller's voice rose like a whisper through the years. And that was the day the old rancher tore the town apart, just to stitch it back together stronger than before.